Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, bonjour, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are welcoming back an old friend. Lydia Lukidis is joining us from Montreal, Quebec, to tell us about her brand new creative nonfiction book, The Broken Bee's Nest. Hey, for all the authors that are listening out there, I wanted to share with you this great email that we received here at the Reading with Your Kids podcast from Dr. Linda Mubarak. She is a past guest and the author of Maxine's New Job. Here's the email. Dear Fatima and Jed, good news! Maxine's New Job has been nominated to receive the prestigious Henri Award at the 2018 Christian Literacy Awards for Outstanding Literacy Work in the Children's Book Division. I sincerely believe your certifying Maxine as a great read helped bring increased social media attention to the book. Thank you for the exposure and the great marketing. We are so happy for Dr. Linda Mubarak that her book, Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read, Maxine's New Job, received this prestigious recognition. We would love to help your book receive that same kind of recognition. If you are interested in having your book considered for our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program, please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on the contact button, send us a note, and we'll send all the information back to you, or you can go right to our Certified Great Read page on our website. It's fun, it's easy, and it is really an effective way to let the world know that your book stands out above all the rest. The Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program. Joining us right now for one of my favorite places in the world, Montreal in Quebec, Canada. She's been on the show before. She's here to talk about a brand new book called The Broken Bee's Nest. Let's all say bonjour to our friend, Lydia Lukidis. Lydia, how are you?
I'm great. It's great to be here again.
Thanks very much for being on the show. We're really excited. Lydia and I were talking a little bit about Montreal and my current connections to that beautiful city. I'd love to hear more about The Broken Bee's Nest.
Absolutely. Well, it's published by Kane Press, and it's a story about two young children who are taking a walk in the forest, and all of a sudden, they're looking for the perfect tree to build a tree house. And all of a sudden, they find the perfect tree. However, they hear a buzzing sound, and there seems to be a couple of bees in the vicinity. And it turns out that there's actually a bee's nest on that particular tree, but the bee's nest is broken. And so the children are quite concerned about where the bees could find a new home. So they actually get the help of a local beekeeper, and they actually learn how to make a beehive themselves, a man-made beehive. So the book is very much in line with the whole makers movement. It's not just learning about science and but how to also be engaged and become an agent of action and actually do something.
Tell us a little bit more about the makers movement.
Well, I love it because it gets children not only listening and learning about science, but it gets them engaged in a very practical level. It's really easy to open up a textbook and learn about photosynthesis, how does it work, but it's quite another thing to actually do exercises, tangible exercises, that can help you learn the material in a much more concrete way.
You know, I love that your characters have that they feel this connection with the bees, and they have a caring, and they want to help and help the bees find a new home. And that's a beautiful thing, and it's a really important thing too, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But at some point, our natural kind of concern and respect of other creatures seems to kind of fade away in favor of our comfort, and we need to get what we want. Where do you think that happens, and why do you think it happens?
Well, that's a really interesting point. I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Before writing this book, I had a ridiculous fear of bees. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm the person who would run away if a bee approached me, and I knew that if I didn't do anything, the bee wouldn't harm me. It was on an intellectual level, I knew that. but I would still run away, and it was quite ridiculous. And after writing this book, I just had this really beautiful understanding, because, it wasn't just about doing research. I actually spoke to a beekeeping expert over in Ontario, and I got all the inside scoop about, the nature of beekeeping and how, the minds of a bee operate. And I had this newfound respect for these little furry creatures. And I don't know if I would not run away from a bee now. Let's see what happens this summer. But I have a new appreciation, and I feel like it's just breaking into the unknown. Sometimes we fear things that we don't know enough about. And once we know more about these creatures or about this thing, then that fear just seems to dissipate.
I have a fascination with bees. Unfortunately, I can't really explore them. One of my neighbors is a beekeeper and has honey, and it's amazing. We live right next to a wildlife sanctuary, so and we have the property that I could easily, we could create a hive and keep bees. I'm actually, though, deathly allergic to bees. So
boy.
I can't, but I've been fascinated to understand just how very important bees are to not only to, we all know that bees help pollinate the beautiful flowers and everything, but there's so much more, and they're really vital to our existence. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's one thing that astounded me. I didn't really know much about bees. As I said, they were just creatures that I never really thought too much about. But after writing this book, I realized that if we didn't have bees in our ecosystem, things would fall apart. We wouldn't have food to eat. There would be so many things that would go disastrously wrong. And so it really got me thinking about the fabric of our universe and how every little being, no matter how small, no matter how big, plays a really integral role. And it just got me realizing how important bees are, not just for us to eat honey. That's just one of the beautiful side products we get from it, but actually to sustain our existence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And bees are, from my understanding, bees are in trouble right now. They're facing a bit of a crisis. Am I right about that?
Absolutely, and that also surprised me. I wasn't really aware of that. It's not something you think about on a daily basis, but there are actually a lot of endangered animals today, and I hope that we gain a further respect for our brothers and sisters and the creatures around us, because it's really important for us to remain aware of what we're doing also to the environment.
That is so important, and there's a lot of different messages I think that families can really have some great conversations about, and that idea of helping kids understand just how important this little teeny insect is to everything here on Earth. I think helping them understand that can help them really kind of embrace when we tell our little ones that they're really important to us and that they can do wonderful things in this world.
That's really beautiful. I'm glad you said that. I think one of the subplots in this book is the nature of empathy, and having empathy for someone other than yourself. And, looking at this little creature who's wounded or their house is falling apart, and having empathy because the brother actually is empathetic first, and the sister is still hesitant because of her fear. And then as the book progresses and the story moves along, she then has a new understanding of the beast herself. And I just love this idea of developing empathy for creatures that are around us, because empathy is not just reserved for humans. It's for everything on this planet, mm-hmm. including the plants and the trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know myself, I mentioned that I have this allergy. I understand that if you don't mess with bees, they're not going to mess with you. They understand that they're this little thing, and they also, right. I guess, they don't last very long after they sting you, from my understanding. Right. But I know that the people who know me, and they know I have this allergy, they freak out anytime, we're outside and there's a bee comes around. They're like grabbing me like I'm the president, trying to rush me inside the house. I love one of the things that you were mentioning, that the Broken Bee's Nest has some really kind of fun sidebars and some activities that kids and families can engage in.
Absolutely. One thing, I absolutely love nonfiction. Nonfiction has come a long way. If you recall, back in the day, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, textbooks that were nonfiction were extremely dry and boring, and they read like encyclopedias. And nowadays, there's so many branches of nonfiction, like, for example, creative nonfiction, which The Broken Bee's Nest is, whereby we're taking the premise of, the real notion of beekeeping, and we're giving accurate information. We're giving sidebars that contain facts. However, it encapsulates that within a creative story, a narrative that's not real, it's fictional. So you bring the two together, and I find it's very engaging for kids to understand about something that's scientific, but in a really fun and easy to understand manner.
I love that. Creative nonfiction.
Right.
I think that's, if you were a lawyer, then I'd watch my back, and like, trying to figure out what kind of games you kind of play. But no, you're right. We have come a long way, in our understanding of learning. And actually, I think what we've done is we've kind of circled back, because I think a lot of human learning from the very beginning of time has been this kind of creative nonfiction. We take things that are difficult to understand, and then we weave them into stories because we understand, we have this kind of innate understanding that stories kind of capture our imagination and capture our attention, whereas just a list of facts is it might connect with some folks, but not with most.
And I'll take it a step further, because I'm really researching a lot of books that are strictly nonfiction, which is to say there's no creative narrative. It's like only facts. And it takes a really good writer, a really skilled writer, to make that engaging. For example, Melissa Stewart, all of her books are strictly nonfiction, and yet she finds a way to weave that into a very engaging way of presenting the information, whereby kids are actually interested in learning. But it does take a talented author.
Mm-hmm. And we are so happy that you are a talented author and can do that. Tell me, do you find a really big difference between writing the creative nonfiction and then writing just a pure story?
Absolutely. I mean, what's funny is that you never really know what you like until you try it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I have a background in science, by the way. I studied pure and applied science. And so I was, really going to be an engineer. I was all about science, and I was pretty good at it. And then I realized, I'm an artist, so forget the science, let's throw that away, and I'm going to study literature in university, which I did. And then, of course, I'm a writer. I've been writing since I was 6 years old. But now what's fun is that both worlds are coming together and merging. The world of art and the world of science are coming together for me. And so whereas I used to only write fiction, now I'm really enjoying writing nonfiction and creative nonfiction. So it's really interesting, the journey that life brings you on, and you end up in places you would never expect, and yet you're fully aligned and you're loving what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm excited about is, we've heard the term STEM for a long time: science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Right.
Nowadays, we're hearing STEAM, and I think initially people, cynically thinking, people were like, oh, well, all this... the sciences are getting all this attention, and the arts are kind of falling behind. So let's throw an A in there, make it STEAM, so we can get some attention too. Right. But in reality, I think if you look at what's happening in science, I think there's a lot of art happening in science. There's a lot of, we always talk about the scientific way of looking at things, but I think there's some of that artistic way of thinking that's creeping into science, and that's absolutely needed in science, because there's some amazing things that are happening in the science world.
Absolutely. And, my mother once said something to me that I'll never forget. She said, you know what, Lydia, even math can be creative. And I thought about that for a while. I was quite young when she told me, and I thought she was nuts at first. And now, through the years, I realized she's right. It can be creative. It's all in how you perceive things. And in how we experience things, that's where the artistic premise comes in. But science is all around us. You can't get away from it. Everything that's around us, is numbers and physics and laws. It's governed. Our life is governed by that. But art is all around us too. And I think both are important and provide a really broad view of our existence.
Now, I am going to ask a question that is very sincere, but it's going to sound silly, so I apologize for that. No, I really do. I love books that have the sidebars. And so you have the main kind of the meat of the story and the narrative, but then you have these sidebars, and I'm always, I love it, but it also makes me crazy because I don't know if I should like read the whole text, the meat of the text first, and then go back to the sidebars, or stop and read the sidebars and go back, and it's just sometimes it just kind of makes me crazy. So what would your suggestion be?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I think nonfiction is definitely, sidebars are quite common, or little snippets of information, different information on the same page, because children think differently now. I mean, we're in a different generation where they're, playing a lot of video games, and their attention span is lower. And so, this is what the publishing industry has determined, that putting a lot of facts in different ways can be a fun way, a good vehicle to present that information. But if that bothers you, you can just keep to the story, read the story, and then go back and read the sidebars. I do find them distracting at times as well, I won't lie. When I'm writing the story, I tend to write the sidebars separately so that I can focus on my story and not get distracted. But I certainly know exactly what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, even as you and I are speaking right here, there's I'm just counting. There's 5 windows open on my open on my laptop here, and I'm actually bouncing. I'm getting close to 100. I'm bouncing between them.
We multitask, right? This is the age of multitasking.
Yeah. But that was always something that was I do remember it was an awful long time ago, but the first time I picked up a book that had those kind of, it was exciting. It's like, whoa, we got this, and I can look at that, and but it was always kind of like, where should I look now?
Well, you know what? Honestly, everyone's brain works differently, and we read books differently, and we have personal taste on what books we gravitate towards. So, if a child likes to read fiction, then they tell them continue reading fiction. If another one likes nonfiction, go do that. And some students like to read graphic novels. And for me, as long as they're reading, I'm happy. Mm-hmm. So however the information is presented, it doesn't really matter. You just need to find what's right for you. Mm-hmm.
Was there one, in doing research for this beautiful book, The Broken Bee's Nest, was there one kind of factoid that really kind of surprised you and amazed you?
Well, there's 2 things. I mean, the first one being that they're now being endangered, because I wasn't aware of that and how scary that is. Mm-hmm. But the second thing was just simply that how the consciousness of an animal is so innate to them. Bees don't sit there thinking, okay, today I have to do this. I'm going to make a to-do list of getting the pollen and, going back to my bee's nest. They just do it. It's just intrinsic. And I find that amazing. And the more I do research on various nonfiction books, I see that animals, they just have this deep intuition, and they're kind of going with the flow. Mm-hmm. Whereas us humans, we tend to overthink and, got our to-do list and so on and so forth. But there's a certain magic with animals that happens whereby they're just being themselves all the time and nothing else. And that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah. Is there a lesson that we can learn from animals? Obviously we've been blessed with a I guess some would say a higher consciousness or higher intelligence, but like you said, sometimes that can get in the way and really kind of drive us a little bit crazy.
I think the big lesson is to be present. Mm-hmm. To be present, to see what's happening around you. How many of us went to work this morning, don't even remember driving to work because we're not present. We don't really know what's happening. We're just an autopilot, whereas animals are present. So it's just a matter of taking the time to breathe, first of all, and that's good advice for everybody, including myself, because my mind tends to work at warp speed. And to just be present and use your 5 senses to really look at this beautiful world all around us, and to be here now. And not in the future, not in the past, but right now. And animals do that, as I say, intrinsically. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we could learn how to do ourselves.
Absolutely. I think this is beautiful. I mean, you're mentioning being present, and I just know there are times when I sit down and I think about all of the creatures that are living on our property. You know, I'm so happy that our home has become this really hub of not only the center of celebrations for my family and for my wife's family and for the international kids who come and have lived with us over the years. But then I go outside and I really love the times when I think about all of and it's literally thousands of creatures that are sharing this space with us.
Absolutely. And, it makes me think maybe I should write a book about spiders next, because I am deathly afraid of spiders. So maybe writing that book will help me also develop empathy towards these little creatures.
I have to share this when here in our home, my studio is in our basement, and it's beautifully finished and furnished and everything, and we have a room down here where our international students stay. And one of our international students, when she was going back to China before she was starting university here in the States, I said to her, I goes, "What can we do to make this space that you lived in more inviting? How can we make it more inviting? What can we do?" And she said, "Well, you might want to take care of the spider in the bathroom." And I goes, "What? There's a spider? What? Why didn't you tell me?" And she said, "Well, I really like spiders, but the next kid might not, and they might be afraid."
Well, I have to admit, as much as I don't like spiders, I don't kill them. What I do is I try to trap them in a glass and I put them outside, because I just can't bring myself to kill another living being, even if it's a spider. So,
well, that's good advice. Well, we're really excited. We really want to encourage folks to check out The Broken Bee's Nest, the latest work from our friend Lydia Lukidis. And, Lydia offers free children's stories, games, and activities every month. And to get them, what do they need to do, Lydia?
Oh, it's very easy. You just need to go to my website, which is www.lydialukidis.com. And from there, you can register for my newsletter, and I just love writing. And I give a lot of workshops in schools, and they really enjoy getting all these free stories. So it's just become a habit of mine that every month I offer something new.
That is wonderful. Well, we've been talking today about the beautiful new book, The Broken Bee's Nest, written by our guest, Lydia Lukidis. Lydia, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me once again.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We have two wonderful guests. Kathleen Doherty is going to be in here to tell us about Don't Feed the Bear. And J.I. Spencer will be here to talk to us about champ building character. I've mentioned in the past that we're looking for a few great schools to host our new experience, Reading with Your Kids Live. Summer's right around the corner, and we would love to bring this totally interactive family event that celebrates our shared love of reading and learning to a public library in your area. It's really, really easy to do. The best thing to do is to talk to your public librarian and tell her about Reading with Your Kids Live and ask them to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com/live. Hey, I want to thank Lydia Lukidis for joining us today, letting us know all about The Broken Bee's Nest. We also want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to go outside and explore your surroundings with your kids. Thank you so much for leaving a review on the podcast at iHeartRadio Podcast app, or maybe at iTunes or Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. And, of course, thank you so much for making the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.